Hello, everybody. Happy New Year and welcome to today's show, which, as you can see, we're going to be talking about how to create and sell an RPO service. Now, Pete, you don't look like Mike. I can't help but feel.
I think I look a lot like Mike, more than I
Right.
perhaps am comfortable with. But I see what you're saying. I see what you're getting at. Mike's not here.
He isn't. And we've got you today, which is a very special moment for us all. It's still my show, but now it's even more obvious. So on today's Mike Ames show, Pete, we're talking about RPOs. We have got a very special guest who I'm going to introduce in a minute. But before then, can you just explain just one sentence what an RPO is? So we're all singing from the same hymn sheet.
Okay. I think for me, an RPO, and speaking to people who run them, an RPO is about moving your recruitment service to a client from an outside one to an inside one. So you become embedded within the client rather than being something they pass work out to. And that covers a lot of things, but we're going to dig into those fairly soon.
Okay, fantastic. And to help us do that, we have a very, very special guest today, and that is Mr. Jamie Stevenson. So here he is. Hello, Jamie.
How you doing, guys?
Good, thank you. Very, very good. So, Pete, can you tell everybody why we've got Jamie on the show today?
Yes. So Jamie's been a client of the business, mainly of Mike's, for several years now. If I'm right on this, Jamie, let me see if I've summarised this properly. So you're the founder of SJ Group, previously SJ Recruitment, but doing more than just recruitment now. So we have moved on. Been going around about 6 years, reached a team of 10, and you started doing RPO services about 5 years ago for a range of technology firms. That covers life sciences, manufacturing, e-com, that kind of space. And the reason you're here today is to talk about that initial experience and then what it's become over those 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely sounds about right. Nice.
He's very succinct, isn't he? He's very succinct.
Absolutely.
Okay, right. We are, as always, guys, as we're going through, if you're watching us live, please ask us any questions. Jamie's very kindly agreed to try and answer as many as possible. So if you do have any questions as we go through, feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll bring them up. But Pete, let's get started. Let's get started with our first question.
Okay, fabulous. So, Jamie, let's set some initial context, because I know when we did this for our breakthrough group internally, the first thing everybody wanted to know about was what exactly is an RPO in your version. So would you like to just give us an idea about what your RPO service covers now?
It's very unique because we've sort of evolved over the years as to how we approach it. But my perception of RPOs, from being previous agencies and before setting up my business, was, it's reserved for the big boys, your Randstads, your Page Groups, your Hayes. They have big outsourcing teams, big solutions teams. And, that was my knowledge of it at that point. I think from what we've built over the last 5 to almost 6 years, because it was, our first one was with a client that I started working from day dot of launching the business, on my own in the bedroom. And what we tried to build is something where we embed ourselves within that business so that we can add a lot more value in the early stages of defining a project brief. So, a role profile, a structure of a business, if they want to achieve certain things, metrics. A lot of it in the early days was working with businesses that were pushing for investment. So it's making sure that they got, the structure of people in place at the right time to justify, going after certain phases of investment that they were for. A lot of what we did in the early days was with a big e-com technology group that, I've known for many years, from 4 people through to 75. And the trigger point for us was when they took on their first investment. I was doing all of the recruitment myself for them at the time as more of a exclusivity arrangement.
That's my fault. Sorry, guys.
It just reminded me to check mine as to whether it's on silent.
Turn mine off.
Good I'm point. Such a pro. I'm so sorry. I do apologise.
So, for us, I don't use the language RPO. It's an embedded service. It's a solution that we're providing. I'm a firm believer in recruitment is tactical and talent acquisition is strategic. So, when it's really started, we were getting demands of us really from said client, and I ended up hiring somebody that on the 3rd time of asking she did join, and she's RPO through Randstad and Adecco, ex-temp agency recruiter, high biller. She'd worked in-house as well, so she was the perfect person to come in and help launch that as a brand and an offering in its own right, separate to what I was doing with the search and selection business.
Okay. I think we'll come on to her. We'll come on to that experience of bringing her on in just a second. I just want to dig a little second here, because I think what you said was, what I heard was that this embedded service, there is still a recruitment component. You're still given briefs. You're still finding the right people. You're still presenting them to the appropriate hiring managers. But there's also this wrapper of professional advice.
Yes.
Some might call it consultancy. So I guess kind of two questions. Does the recruitment component change very much, or does it remain pretty much the same?
But you're still looking for great people at the end of the day. I think both parties are more committed in one of these arrangements anyway. Timing isn't so much of an issue. A lot of the time, if a role comes through and you spend a bit more time working with them on interview process. A lot of the hiring managers that we were hiring for in the early days had never hired previously. So I was actually doing interview training with them. We were looking at their onboarding process, at what HR procedures they got in place, because they had nobody in HR. I was almost operating like an external HR consultant as well, to some degree, but with the pure, focus around people, and not some of the other HR elements. That's not our bag. But for me, the theme of the umbrella of people, how do you approach certain specialisms within the marketplace? Now, a lot of the business that we were working in the early days was tech and e-com focused. So there were certain job types that were very trendy at that point. So, we were building talent pools out for them. And that's the differentiation because you've got the leverage, you've got the commitment from the client. You can be talking to them about how we're building your own database. We're building a talent pool for you. These are people that you don't necessarily need now, but you will need in 6 months' time once you hire these ones that we're working on at the minute. So it gives you a much more of a longer term view as to what areas you're going to be, sourcing further down the line. So it's taken a much more of a long term perspective and breaking that. And trying to break down individual projects for that client. So, like I say, with talent acquisition, a lot of the time it's about talent mapping. There's other elements to consider. How are you presenting your employer as a brand? We talk a lot in recruitment about EVP and channeling that into the client. Well, this is live and breathe it in that moment. You need to be giving good advice about how that business can improve. And actually the big sell is to push them towards a direct hiring strategy. And that's, we're the first part of that. And that's the long-term aim. And if you work towards it, then you've got a solid client for 2 to 3 years, however long that looks like. It does boil down to understanding what types of businesses at what size you were
after. I think we'll touch on that again in a second, because I think there is a definite, the way you and I talked about it is this delays losing a client to internal direct hire and TAs. It doesn't prevent it entirely.
Absolutely.
But like you say, 2 to 3 years is a good time. I think, just to summarize what I thought I heard here, is it's still recruitment, but it's recruitment the way it should be done. Because now, rather than a handoff from a HR person who often has more on their plate than just thinking about the talent and would love to get involved in it, but dragged in to take care of, you're actually speaking to people and going, what are you hiring in the next 12 months? What should we start looking for? Have you thought about the way? It's all of those things that can frustrate a recruiter from the outside looking in. You get to be in there and fix in the first place, and it's viewed as a service. So I can see why it was so appealing to implement multiple times with multiple clients, because you've now got 5 or 6 clients, I believe you said, on this service.
6 brands that we have that agreement in place with. And so they're rolling 12-month exclusivity arrangements, essentially.
Okay.
I know we're going to come on to a little bit of the legal side in a bit, but it's not too dissimilar to working with a business under a retainer or an exclusivity project. There's a lot of similarity there, but we're quite selective in who we work with. We like them actually to be within touching distance so we can get on site, and the way that they should make, the way that we hope that we make them feel is that we're an extension of their own team, but we're working remotely. And if we need to come on site and help you out, then we will. We've got one big brand over in Telford that we're doing a lot of work with at this moment in time that are trying to double in size. And I was there only 2 days ago. Thursday. I know on Tuesday, aren't we? So, just having the ability to be able to offer that level of service, I think it will be quite difficult to do it, to sell this to a US business or somebody in Central Europe, where it's going to be more difficult for you not to get FaceTime in front of them. So we try and hone into the Northwest and the Midlands area, to be honest.
Okay, so and then that leads us quite nicely. I think we'll come on to how you launched it the first time because people will be interested. But let's keep that chain of conversation going. It's not right for every client, and I think that partly reflects what you said earlier. Randstad, these guys at Deco, they will make it work for anyone because they have the resources to throw at it. The reality is your business is still only 10 strong. It does sit in the S/M of SME. So you have to be selective because what you can't have is have it fail because you're putting a lot on the line. We'll talk about legals, as you said, in a second. So there's partly a case of it needs to be that you can actually deliver what you're promising here. And I think location absolutely is a factor. Are there other things you think when you look at as a small business trying to offer this service to people, are there other ticks you want to see in a prospective client before you would really think it would be worthwhile doing? Who's it right for, I guess I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, we spent a lot of time when we decided we want to roll this out and offer it to more clients. There's always been a legacy technology group that we've done a lot of work with, and they have multiple brands as well that we sit within, and actually we sit in the same offices as them. So it's great for us because we interview them on site. And then
definition of embedded, yeah.
That is truly embedded. So, how do we achieve that impact with other clients? And I sort of said to the guys, maybe we should just focus regionally in certain areas. To answer the question in how do you define who your ideal client profile does come down to what your capacity level is. I was fortunate to get Emma involved at a good time when, this business went through a degree of investment. They soaked up a lot of her time. She was practically working in-house for them for at least 18 months before we started rolling it out to other brands and other clients. And we tend to focus on businesses that are early stage, whether that be startup, scale up, maybe up to 20 million turnover. Generally, those types of businesses in that world want to double in size and want to achieve scale, and a lot of them go after investment. So we're there to put the people structures in place so that they can achieve that, and they look more desirable from an investment perspective. So we can work on that, and obviously we've got a track record now, been able to take businesses through it. But there was a really good example, a manufacturer that I work with locally, 2 factories in the UK. I was chatting to them, they were really interested in understanding how that service could benefit them, but because they'd got constant need, at all levels as well, the churn rate was just too high. They're a circa 100 million turnover business, and I just had to say, look, that we wouldn't be able to provide at that level. I'm happy to be your exclusive recruiter, and that's what we are with them. But to take them to that next tier, just wouldn't have been possible. I think we would have underperformed, underdelivered, and I would have broken the relationship that I built up for 10 years. So that's the difficulty, because you do want to try and upsell and try and get these sort of sticky clients and take more from them. But sometimes you have to be honest with yourself and just say that's not for us. And actually we get a lot more layer of, a considerably higher level of control and influence in the founder-led businesses that, certainly if I go in and work with them in more of a people advisory capacity, and then Emma and Udine, who work in the talent partners function, will do a lot of the day-to-day, but I'll help them with, talent mapping, giving them some ideas about how we can improve their employer brand and everything else that comes into, talent acquisition. You're absolutely right. In advisory, that's invariably what I feel like when I'm talking to them. But because they're founder-led businesses a lot of the time, or they're running a business on behalf of a PE or whatever, you invariably can make a lot of impact, and the influence level is higher.
If I can play back what I've kind of heard, because I'm now translating this as, we've got clients on the program, and one of the things that comes up quite a lot, and this is what you're triggering for me, is people will describe, I had this client, I've grown with them, I've helped, I think you said earlier, the first person you brought this in with, you helped take them from 5 to 20 employees. It's those kind of people, and frequently it's and then behind my back, they hired a HR person, they hired a TA, and all of a sudden I'm out. This is for those clients who are thinking about it. It's rather than committing that, why don't you commit to me? And I guess part of the pitch, and we'll talk about how to sell this in a second, part of the pitch is you've got a lot more flexibility in your resourcing support than an individual TA. They've got 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. You can flex and treble that if needs be, or drop it down.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the big thing. It's the way that we sell it is it's the cost effectiveness of having an in-house team with the resources of using an agency, because we've got all the resources that we need because we have other agency divisions within the business. So we're able to utilize those tools. Whereas you hire somebody in-house, not only have you got the salary and everything else on top, you've got all of the tools that they need. You're not going to get preferential rates with LinkedIn if you need a recruiter license and, job boards and all of those additional tools that naturally we all in agency, procure and have access to. That is a bit different. And that's some of the things that by getting in the right people, getting Emma in at the right time, she was able to say, well, I need this, but I don't need that. And I know you want to talk about, tooling and tech stacks and all that type of stuff, but
and I'm torn between which one to chase first. I think you've mentioned Emma twice now. Yeah. Kirsty, you're on mute, apparently. Can you hear Kirsty, Jamie?
I cannot.
Oh, I'm sorry. There you go. Here I am. I'm sorry. The dog is snoring, so I had to mute myself. When you're doing this with people, this is with established clients. So you're not going in as like a pitch to somebody you've never worked with before. This is people you have a long-standing relationship with. They know you're good. They respect you. You respect them. And they are the ones that you're pitching this RPO towards.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to. We've had a few conversations recently, but it's mainly because we've been recommended by other brands as to other, and we are, to be fair, we are in discussions with a couple at the minute that we won't have, say, worked with before, but there is a connection through other clients that we work with. And so we've been recommended to them. And yeah, it's tough because actually you want to be working with businesses that you've got an established relationship with. And that's how we did it in the early days, because you've proven capability. And rather than say in agency world where, you want to bring in clients that which is a sticky client for a sustained period of time that you can sell retained solutions to, this is actually adding an additional tier to that and saying, well, we want to get to that point, but also we want to, we want all of your work for the next 2 or 3 years. What can we do to try and achieve that? So it is trying to sell, the benefits to them of going down that road, which a lot of the time can come down to cost effectiveness. But there are also businesses that are time starved, that don't have structures in place. More often than not, they don't have HR teams. So we can quite quickly spot the gaps. And then, by getting in there, me and Emma can sort of do a bit of an analysis on who they have so far, what all of their onboarding processes, their interview process, we'll even go as far as we've got ATS relationships where we'll encourage clients to use a certain ATS that then we can tap into, and they're actually
on their behalf
populating their own database, which sounds mad because what are we doing in recruitment? We're building value into our own database. But what we're actually saying is this is, coming away from that a little bit, building your own talent pools that are your proprietary, under your proprietary ownership. You can then pull in. So in 2-3 years' time, if you do decide to bring somebody in-house full time, you've got the legacy there that you can call upon. So there's a lot of things like that businesses really like, like the model. And unfortunately for us, a lot of the time it comes down to structuring a costing pricing structure that aligns, because they're coming to you with 20 vacancies and you've got to come with an idea of how much that's going to cost them either per month on a subscription model or a per hire model. And a lot of the early days was very much a per hire model, but the percentage of that was a lot less, because I'm of the opinion I'd rather have 20 jobs at 10% than have 2 at 25. It's away from the thinking of specialist search and selection agency mindset, and actually saying, well, we want to deliver a solution, not just one project.
And I guess one of the things I hear a lot from people when we talk about if they've got that retained background, they don't want to talk about anything below retained because it will invalidate the retained. It's like they'll think of me as cheap, and I'll lose the retained. And that's, you've not seen that, have you? These are 2 distinct services for 2 distinct situations.
Yeah, it's making it attractive, and so that they feel like they can come to you with everything. And there are certain clients that we say to them, look, if you really want to do your, shop floor level stuff yourself, absolutely fine. and we'll have an agreement in place where if it kicks in at a certain salary band, that's where we then step in, where it's more of a professional service rather than, your sort of more high street temp agency sort of approach, which is very different to how we work anyway. But then, we have done that in the past. We've populated warehouses and just approached it on a project basis and come up with a slightly different pricing structure for them to, to maximise that, that body of work.
Yeah, because there are two flavors. You're touching on this quite nicely. There are two flavors of RPO. There is RPO as a phase, if you will, but you can also have project RPO. So you can even sell that with people who have perhaps an existing TA or HR resource. That's your existing resource, which is calibrated to your normal hiring. Here's the next 12 months. It's going to swamp them. Why don't you just do a deal with us? It's the same principle and process.
Very much so. And it is just about sort of shifting a little bit to each individual client's needs. We do have one brand who has a very strong HR manager who's ex-recruitment, and by definition, she's going to try and do what she can. And in effect, she almost uses our resources as resources. So she'll still manage and try and manage the process herself, but we'll be putting in, the people in, CVs in and helping out with it as and where we can. But actually, that relationship is much more resourcing focused than, say, full delivery. So if you've got the ability to I guess adapt and be versatile in that respect, because one of the things that I've learned with working with Mike, I'm traditionally a 360 out and out. That's everything that I've always done. But Mike has got me onto more of a layered model, and it falls nicely into how you can approach this, because you basically need to deliver this service at a lower cost base. So you need to break that recruitment role down. I don't need people in the talent partners team that can go out and BD. A lot of the BD is done through me and done through recommendation and referral and so on. So we just need really strong resources and delivery. And, although Emma's done 360, she's very much delivery orientated and resourcing. And then Dean is pure out and out resourcing as well. And then, we do a bit more of an account management structure where we have, one point of contact for each client, but it could be that Emma or you, Dean, doing the resourcing depending on how and what pressures they've got on with other clients, so we can flex it a bit more, and I can dive in and help out as and when's needed.
And I think this touches on something you said earlier, and I like to reinforce it because I know recruitment, one of the hardest things is to say no. Even though you should say no, you should say no sometimes. And sometimes no is choosing not to pursue. And sometimes no is saying no. The key thing from what I've taken from our conversation earlier and from what you've said here a little bit, but worth bringing out, is you have to respect your own resource capability. So as you said, you can't take someone who has a complete standard high level of requirements, because you will swamp your resourcing and let down other clients. There is almost an assumption, a gamble even, that one client's peak will coincide with one client's trough.
Absolutely.
So you don't need to service everybody at max. You are finding that equilibrium. And I guess let's touch on how you first sold it and then how you now sell it, because the story of how you launched it, I think, is a great example for how many people should launch it. So do you just want to quickly summarize client, the situation, and what you did to get it up and running?
It was an established client that had the founder had a business some years before that I'd done some work with, launched a new business. There's 3 or 4 of them in there at the time. We both live in the same area. So, I helped him build out that early stage team. It was an e-com brand at the end of the day. And as they really started to grow, I was being pulled in lots of different directions, because I was also working within engineering and manufacturing and clients in my specialism that I was doing a lot more with. And so the trigger point came when they took on investment, to the tune of about 20 million quid. So they needed to triple in size within about 18 months, So we were looking at adding in 50 heads, over the course of a 8-9 month period. So, once they presented that to me, I said, I'm going to have to hire somebody. And that was the trigger point to say, well, I've sought feedback from them. What is it that you want from me? They loved the fact I was using their offices as hot desk space for the day. So I was going in 2 or 3 days a week, and, they became good friends of mine in those early days. And, they could see what I was doing. I was doing a lot more work with them on a day-to-day basis. So, naturally it sort of evolved from there. And then as we began to go through that phase of getting their business into, new offices and more people, and, we started looking at it, and they'd got clients that had seen what they'd done, and they put us in touch with their clients. So sometimes the relationships just escalated because of, they could see how they were achieving that growth in the time that they had. So we worked with other ecom brands as well that were linked. And I think probably around 21, 22, we started to think, well, how do we brand this? Because at the time it just sat within the umbrella of, what my business was at the time, which was SJR Partners. But we need to differentiate it because it is more of a generalist approach, because you're doing a wider facet of
wider scope of roles
and different levels as well. You could be doing, I was doing a CFO, and the next day I was doing a warehouse team leader. It's, you have to be able to adapt to those differing requirements, and that's why, bringing in somebody like Emma was great, because that's all that she'd done before. So she taught me a lot, and between me and her, we sort of decided to formalize what it was going to look like, how we then sell that to other businesses. And it was very softly to start with, just because, we didn't necessarily have the capacity, and, it's a much longer road in terms of achieving the same profitability levels as you would do as a 360 recruiter. So I couldn't really lose that, because that's where my profit area is. But this is great because it's recurring revenue, it's building really strong relationships. And luckily I managed to balance the two. But a lot of the advice that in the early days was pick one lane and go for it. But I'm glad I did what we did, because it's built more on much more solid foundations now, rather than throwing a load of cash at it and saying, well, let's go and get 20, 30 brands on board. And, the one thing that we don't want to compare ourselves to is like a Chapter 2 or a Bond Global, or these businesses that, basically contract out talent acquisition partners. That's effective. Do and charge a monthly fee for it. It's usually 3 times the cost of that individual, which is great. But they go after big brands, they go after the big tickets. I'm not interested in going after those. I want to work with clients that, that want to go on a journey and that are at a certain stage of their development where, they maybe haven't got a brand. We can help them build that employer brand as well. Look, you spent all this time and money building a consumer brand. We need to transpose that now for you to be an employer brand and attract them in that way. So that's how we sell it to them a lot of the time is, let's think about all the good things you've done so far to get to this point. We need to think a bit differently about, you're now an employer and you want to get the best people into and onto your journey.
I do have a question, Jamie, on that. Is when do you know it's the right time to sell it? Because I know you mentioned earlier, like if people get investment or if they're that early stages and they're like, but at what point, when do you know when's the good time? Because obviously you pitch it too late, they've got a TA in or a HR person, you kind of scuppered. Pitch it too early and they think, oh, I'm not ready for that. When do you know is the right time?
It's very difficult for everyone. It's going to be different. When is the right time to pitch a retained solution? More often than not, you do that first. And actually, if they don't go through it, then you fall back to the next tier and so on. But I think we have very much like a tick sheet of, are they in the right space? Are they in the right location? Are they the right size, scale? So we're generally not talking to all that many clients that are, that are just cold and prospective, because they will be businesses that we already know or have some insight into. We know people in there. So we've got some insider information. And it really does boil down to the relationship at the end of the day. If actually, we've got one brand and one of their founders, me and him have just become really good mates, somebody I'll probably go down the pub and have a pint with. And it's those types of relationships that you really want to try and go the extra mile for, the ones that are already a sticky client and use the embedded. We use the embedded as the next tier. Everybody's always trying to get more from their clients. So instinctively, you're going to know which client is going to be, if they tick all the boxes, you've got a good relationship with them. When I say tick boxes, that's about understanding exactly what your ideal client profile is. If everything's telling you that this is worth a conversation, and don't get me wrong, I've got one manufacturing business at the minute that we agreed to build towards an embedded solution, but we're actually hiring 2 very important roles for them on a retained basis at this moment in time. So the conversation happens is once we've got those 2 important hires in, one is at director level, the other's at head of level. Well, let's have a conversation, because they really like the idea of having their ATS, building their own careers page, building out that that structure. So it often can be that you build up to it. And
Yeah.
it really will boil down to the relationship, because if you oversell it and under deliver, you
You burn a bridge quite badly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we've been really conscious of, that we don't want to lose clients because we're trying to oversell to them. But a lot of the time we're selling it to them because actually we know what their recruitment spend is likely to be and we can make it more efficient. So
I'm picking up a trend, Jamie, actually, from what you're discussing. And I know you're saying relationship, but to take it into a slightly more practical, the sense I get is you can't be a recruiter slightly arm's length, taking the deal that you're given, and that's the only time you speak. You need to be somebody they're talking to about the professional advice almost.
absolutely.
A freebie. You're already in that. They're coming to you because, in the case of your first person, I think they're a really great example. They suddenly went from ticking along okay to crap, we need X, Y, Z. And they could either spend 3-4 months trying to find somebody to help build that for them, which will then spend 2 months. It's like a 6-month delay.
Yeah.
Or we could just talk to Jamie, who we're talking to anyway. And I get the sense that it's the conversation. It's almost not a sell. It's a natural extension of what you're doing anyway with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that client, they got to a point where we'd got our own offices. We got 4 of us in a little tiny office at the time, round the corner from where they were. They were on about doing an office move, taking on a big warehouse, and they invited us to come and work there. So we paid rent, but we were subleasing from our main client on our what we call mini RPO, embedded service. And that's retained now. We've moved again offices with them. I'm sat in their offices now, or our part of their offices, and it's that type of relationship where you can really build something. It doesn't need to be to that extreme. Don't get me wrong, because we have other clients that are, that we've generated ourselves that we're as close to, and we offer the same service, but because they're within a 50-mile radius of us, we can get out and see them when we need to. We've got a client in North Manchester, and every now and again, as their cycle of recruitment happens, as we see that trajectory, we'll get over there, try and map it out and put together a bit of a plan. And it's approaching each one, on a project basis. Look, we're going to give you this time. We're quiet here. I think the natural evolution for us will be if we have a period where we haven't got any of those 6 brands hiring, which is unlikely, but there will be periods where it's a bit quieter. That's our opportunity to go out and, say to other potential clients, we've got some resource, we've got some capacity here, and because we've de-skilled, Emma and Udine that sit within that team, are effectively delivery and resource. They don't do or have the need to do the BD stuff. So they can focus on being out and out delivery and, they're 180s really. Yeah. And it's the layered model that I guess Mike has embedded into me over the last 5 years.
We are big fans of the layered model. Yeah. We are.
So doing all of that in those early days with Mike showed me that I could actually deliver this type of solution.
He'll be very glad to hear that. Okay, now I'm very, very conscious on time, and I do kind of want to touch on attractive cul-de-sacs, things that can potentially go wrong with this service, because there is an investment. Now, we've touched on one of them, which is making sure that you don't outpromise your resourcing potential. So that's one of them, definitely. Is there anything around like the legal stuff and making sure that you're well prepared from a legal note? Is that something you have to be aware of?
Yeah, the legals, we probably took us a year or so to formalise the legals. If the truth be known, they were gentlemen's agreements in the first instance. But bearing in mind, we'll operate, if we're approaching candidates, they'll assume that we work directly for that client. We'll badge it up. We'll have our own auto signatures. We'll be, on LinkedIn in that company profile. So you completely eradicate the recruitment consultant perception, because as far as the candidate's concerned, you're approaching them on behalf of that business and you work for that business, and that's again a part of how we sort of sell it. But I think some of the things that we've learned as well as we've formalised some of these agreements with T's and C's, and our T's and C's were done by a business, very easy to do. They're exclusivity agreements, and we do them on a rolling 12-month. So it's relatively straightforward, not too dissimilar to how you'd approach a retained solution as well. So you have to protect yourself against third parties. The direct hiring one is the tricky one, because naturally a business that is cost conscious is going to want to try and do their own thing. So with a few of them, we have an arrangement that, look, if you want to post an advert on Indeed and push your chances for the first couple of weeks, do that, and then we'll come on board. But the thing to avoid is to both go at it. They're trying to do things themselves because they're trying to save a bit of cost. And, so there's a little bit there. And we've had a couple of instances with clients where there's been a bit of, candidate ownership conversation. But we then put that into our T's and C's in terms of, what is your route to market currently? And we'll try and fit into that to give you the opportunity, if you want to try and do it yourself, that you can. Invariably, it's the lower level, warehouse operatives, customer service, entry level type stuff that sometimes I'll encourage them to try and do that. That is the measure actually of how we're building your employer brand. If you're beginning to get people coming to you more than you have to go and get them, then we're doing our job. We're improving your brand. And actually at that level, we're better off focusing on more of the, mid to senior management areas anyway. So, it's usually a good acid test. Some of them will turn around and say, I want you to do it, but we have to flex the costings on it a bit. We can't do per hire. It needs to be, look, we can get you 10 warehouse in and this is how much it's going to cost us to do it. And so on. So, commercially, you just have to, each one is going to be unique if you approach it the way that we do. Clearly for the big boys, they have a set playbook of how and what they can do and what they can't do and what they will do. So, but we're of a size where we can, we can maneuver and flex it. It's not too much of an issue.
That's a benefit for both you and the client, isn't it? Really, it's not rigid like it is with the bigger ones. Okay, and then you sort of mentioned tech. You mentioned that you encourage some of your clients to have the same ATS. Is there any other tech that you think some people think is really great but potentially isn't, or is there something that you found that really makes this whole process easier?
Yeah, there's certainly one. We use Team Taylor, and Team Taylor is an in-house platform. You couldn't use it as an agency because it's designed to have one business aligned to it, and it taps it. That taps into your careers page. I don't want to. We do have some cost savings associated with us selling that product into clients, but I pass that on to the client, so it's cheap for them to acquire that software. But actually, it's brilliant because it gives them the total transparency and visibility. So you're effectively inviting your client onto an ATS, which you're managing on their behalf, but they have full ownership of. That's not going to be right for everybody. I completely appreciate that. But certain businesses, we have put them onto a platform. We do have through our own it's our own CRM system. We have the ability to create mini portals. So it's not quite as all singing and all dancing, but it does give them something that they can log into and track progress on like a Kanban setup. So you can see everything that's happening with processes and where they're up to. So, short of that, there are other clients and brands that we work with that decide not to go for it, but it's something that we might look at again in a year's time. So then we have to be very clear on and transparent in terms of how we communicate with them where certain processes are up to. But it makes us so much more efficient when they have their own ATS that we're actually,
familiar with
and so on. There are others you can use. Workable, we've had that before. So Workable, Team Taylor, but these are in-house software platforms, ATS platforms designed for companies to use themselves to drive their own direct hiring. And at the point of all the relationships we have at this moment, there's probably 2 or 3 that have got full out and out Team Taylor ATS that, we've shown them how to use it. They can use it. They tap into it. They can give feedback. You can organize video interviews directly from it as well. The functionality is superb, and it actually makes our life easier because we're more efficient, and actually, it reduces your cost base at the end of the day. So, the advertising through those ATSs, the client is paying for because they've paid the subscription for 12 months. So there's lots of benefits in going down that road. The downside to us is that obviously everybody that we generate for them goes into their own database. So they have, legally they own those candidate profiles for a set period of time. As far as GDPR, I think it's 6 months, isn't it? At which you have to disregard
the permission granted.
People, unless they specifically ask to be kept on that database. So we make sure that those emails get sent out at those trigger points so that we can keep that talent pool for that client populated.
Okay. So, Jamie, we're getting towards the end of our time. I think there's a few things worth summarising, and then we'll come to you for your for your top tip. And then if there are any questions, now is your last chance, everybody, to ask any questions you may have. I think, number one, as you said, it's about implementing this with someone you know well already. The first time to implement this, it needs to be someone you know well already. It sounds like it's not something that, if you are a small recruiter business, it's not something you can implement and run simultaneously with your own services. You do need a dedicated person to take the reins on the day-to-day implementation, at least. And it's best done, the way you invite this opportunity is that you are making yourself part of the strategic conversation, hiring conversation, giving that free advice almost to clients, and then you're the natural person they turn to instead of turning to the TA, HR director type avenue. And it sounds like from a tech firm perspective, you do want to encourage them to have their own ATS. It's actually a positive, not a negative. And you do want to get your terms cleaned up, but ideally you should be doing this with someone where there's some flex the first time. Would that be a fair summary, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think just before we're going to come to you, Kirsty, for the top tip, I believe, in a second.
So right? One more second. So before then, I'm going to tell everybody what our next show is, which is on the 28th. We are going to be talking to Nick Butcher about how to get more sales emails read, because pretty much everybody we're speaking to, whether it's on the course, whether it's out and about at kind of events and stuff, is saying that email is getting harder. It's getting much stricter. Spam is a more dangerous thing for us, because these providers are getting stricter about banning and such like. So Nick Butcher is going to come and he's going to talk to us more about how to get more sales emails read. So we're very, very excited about that one. But now, Jamie, as always on the show, you've given loads of value today. And sometimes though, people need that first thing to do, the thing that they need to think about if they're thinking maybe an RPO is something I want to get into. What's your top tip for them? And this is what you said. You said to us, it starts with a strong relationship. Do you kind of want to just elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, and this, to be honest, it was something that it took me a bit of time to do. I didn't look through my client portfolio of, maybe on the search and selection side, the agency side. And in the early days, I should have just gone through and ticked which ones I want to build towards offering this level of service. And obviously the relationship aspect is the most important, because you want to have a really strong relationship with them, because you're going to want to enjoy working with them. They're going to want to enjoy working with you, because it is more embedded. There are more touch points. So, if they're just after from you good CVs and you're a CV farm to them, then for me, is that one I want to work with? Are they a client that actually values my input? Am I able to influence? Have I got good control, through processes with these businesses? So it's probably being honest with yourself about categorizing all of the clients that you currently work with and use it as a target list of, right, I've got this level of relationship with them currently. Have I done retained? Have I done, these additional solutions that you've been able to sell? If you're getting good buying signs from that client and they're valuing what you're doing, you really strong, like I say, relationship, then it's something to push. It doesn't suit out and out 360. If I think back to when I was doing it purely myself, I was having to prioritize my time in higher profitable areas to start with. So it's not always going to suit people that are just a one-man band. But actually, if you can get somebody in that can, even you could do that offshoring, and just get them focusing on the resourcing side, and you just focus on delivery, and you can do it that way. It's certainly something that we've looked into in how we can scale a bit more and take on that sort of outsourced support. Because then you can flex a bit more. But yeah, I think it's establishing and categorizing where your relationships are and deciding which ones are the ones that you feel that tick all of your boxes. Do I want to carry on working with this type of client, for the next 2-3 years in this way?
Yeah, and I like that. I'm most excited about the fact that you did this as a predominantly retained and search and high level client, because I think this is such a great way to create retained work. On a regular basis, repeat work, which is so hard to do with retained, especially if you're dealing with smaller businesses. It's such a beautiful add-on. And the fact that it didn't diminish in their eyes your quality as this senior research-led, it was an additional service that made sense. I love that.
It was one of the big reasons that we branded it separately. So if you look on our website, it has its own area, and actually the message is very different. And a lot of what we talk about, a lot of the language is the same, obviously, but it is more about thinking this is strategic, not tactical. And that's the differentiation between talent acquisition and recruitment. And it's trying to, what we've tried to do is try and find that happy medium, or that hybrid in the middle where, a client might not quite be ready, might be 2 or 3 years away from putting in an out-and-out HR team or an in-house team, but we're going to facilitate that journey that they're going to go on, and they can get a bit more of a try before you buy element, help them build towards it if that's what they so wish. As it stands at the minute, our first original client, we're 6 years in with them now, pretty much. If you account the time that I was working with them as well, and they don't foresee the need to do it themselves. So it can be really long term. So there are others that have got, after a 12-month period, have come away, but then you keep in touch with them, and we've done some ad hoc work with them. And so it can, if you can deliver and you retain those relationships, it can be a real, it can be a real strong.
Amazing.
It's about relationships, 100%. I am just going to end us there. I'm going to hand to Kirsty to do her true ending. I just wanted to take 1 second. The observant amongst you, the regulars, may have noted that there was no sponsor this week. We are changing our sponsorship system going forwards, but I wanted to take that gap that we've created and just say, Jamie touched on this. One of the keys of RPO is that layered fulfillment model. And we've been kicking this around ourselves. We know a webinar is due on that for those that aren't familiar with it. It's a big question. So what we're going to do, as soon as this is finished, I'm going to pop a comment on this LinkedIn post asking if people would be interested in us running a webinar on it. All I want you to do, if you are, is give it a like, and then we'll pick that up in future. If there's enough numbers, we'll make that the webinar we kick off in Feb or March. Kirsty, over to you.
Fantastic. Right. Well, it just ends with me to say thank you. Thank you to everybody who's been watching, and welcome back for the new year. We're very excited about the guests that we've got coming. I want to say thank you to Jamie. You've added so much value. You've been really open with us. You've kind of shared a lot of information with us. So I really, really want to thank you for that, Jamie. Thank you very much.
No worries.
And then I want to say thank you to Pete, mostly because I have to, but probably because I should as well. He's been very helpful today, isn't he? He's good for a mic stand-in occasionally. And yes, and once again, thank you to everybody who's watching, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.